Hollywood in 1965 wasn't supposed to fail. Studios were spending fortunes, huge stars filled the posters, massive sets were built across the world. So how did some of these movies collapse into box office disasters that nearly destroyed careers and drained studio budgets? In this video, we're uncovering 13 of the worst box office catastrophes of 1965, films so expensive, so ambitious, and so misjudged that Hollywood still remembers the damage. And one of them nearly bankrupted an entire studio. Harlow, 1965. Hollywood loves glamorous legends, but sometimes the rush to tell their stories creates a disaster before the cameras even stop rolling. That's exactly what happened with Harlow, a biographical drama about the tragic life of screen icon Jean Harlow. As the film starred Carol Baker and attempted to capitalize on public fascination with the actress whose platinum hair and bold screen presence defined early Hollywood glamour. But the studio made a strange and costly mistake. Another production company was already making a completely different Harlow film at the same time. Both movies rushed into theaters within weeks of each other, confusing audiences and splitting the same potential viewers. Instead of building anticipation, the rivalry diluted interest. Critics also complained that the script relied on exaggerated melodrama rather than genuine historical insight. The performances couldn't rescue the film's uneven storytelling. The result was a film that arrived with curiosity, but quickly disappeared from theaters. A Hollywood legend deserved a powerful biography. Instead, audiences saw a production that felt hurried and strangely unnecessary. King Rat, 1965. War films often promise heroism, courage, and triumphant survival. King Rat offered something very different. Based on James Clavell's novel, the story takes place inside a brutal Japanese prisoner of war camp during the Second World War. Instead of battlefield action, the film explores the psychological struggle of survival inside captivity. At the center of the story is a mysterious prisoner known only as the King, a charismatic American who controls a secret underground trading network inside the camp. Food, medicine, favors, everything can be bought or negotiated if the price is right. The film's themes were complex and morally uncomfortable. Survival often required manipulation, selfishness, and quiet betrayal. Critics admired the film's seriousness and strong performances, but audiences expecting traditional war excitement found a slow, introspective drama instead. The marketing struggled to explain what the film actually was. As a result, King Rat earned respect from reviewers but struggled financially. It became one of those productions that critics appreciated, while the box office remained stubbornly quiet. Morituri, 1965. On paper, Morituri looked like a guaranteed success. The film starred Marlon Brando, one of the most respected actors of the era, alongside the charismatic Yul Brynner. The story promised espionage, deception, and wartime tension aboard a German cargo ship during the Second World War. Brando plays a reluctant spy forced into a dangerous mission by British intelligence. His task is simple to describe, but terrifying to execute. He must secretly sabotage the vessel before it reaches its destination. Once aboard the ship, the tension becomes almost unbearable. Every crew member could expose him. Every mistake could lead to execution. Director Bernhard Vicki created a claustrophobic atmosphere filled with suspicion and quiet psychological pressure. But audiences in 1965 expected a more conventional spy thriller. Instead, they received a slow-burn drama focused on character psychology rather than explosive action. The film's darker tone and deliberate pacing confused viewers who had come looking for excitement. Despite strong performances and respectable reviews, Morituri never found a large audience. What looked like a prestige production slowly faded from theaters, leaving its impressive cast attached to a surprisingly quiet commercial disappointment. Bunny Lake is Missing, 1965. Sometimes a mystery is so strange that audiences don't quite know what to do with it. That was the problem facing Bunny Lake is Missing, a psychological thriller directed by Otto Preminger. The story begins with a terrifying situation. A young American mother living in London arrives at her daughter's new school to pick her up, only to discover that the child is gone. At first, it seems like a kidnapping. But then the investigation takes a bizarre turn. Teachers begin questioning whether the child ever existed at all. Records are missing. Witnesses are uncertain. As the police slowly start wondering whether the mother herself may be unstable, the tension grows as the search spreads across London. Every conversation introduces new doubts about reality. Was the child abducted? Or is the entire story a psychological illusion? The film's unsettling atmosphere fascinated critics, who praised its strange tone and unpredictable twists. But for general audiences in 1965, the narrative felt confusing and deliberately disorienting. Many viewers left theaters unsure how to interpret what they had just seen. Instead of becoming a mainstream thriller success, the film struggled commercially. Over time, it gained cult admiration for its eerie storytelling. But during its original release, the box office simply vanished. Lord Jim, 1965. And few novels carry the literary weight of Joseph Conrad's Lord Jim. When Hollywood decided to adapt the book into a major motion picture, expectations were enormous. The production cast Peter O'Toole, one of the biggest stars of the decade following the success of Lawrence of Arabia. The film also invested heavily in exotic international locations, elaborate sets, and large-scale action scenes designed to recreate the world of 19th-century seafaring adventure. The story follows Jim, a British sailor whose life is shattered by a moment of fear. During a crisis at sea, he abandons a ship full of passengers in what appears to be a cowardly act. Though the passengers survive, Jim's reputation is destroyed. The rest of the film becomes a long search for redemption. Jim travels across distant colonies, hoping to rebuild his honor through courage and sacrifice. Visually, the movie looked spectacular. Tropical landscapes, dramatic sea voyages, and sweeping cinematography gave the film the appearance of a grand epic. But audiences struggled with the pacing. The narrative unfolded slowly, focusing heavily on internal guilt and philosophical reflection, rather than straightforward adventure. What was intended as a thoughtful character study instead felt distant and emotionally cold to many viewers. Despite the impressive production scale and star power, ticket sales failed to match the enormous expectations. The result was a film admired for its ambition, but remembered as one of the decade's most disappointing literary adaptations. Hollywood had attempted to transform a complex novel into a blockbuster. Instead, it created a spectacle that audiences quietly avoided. The Sandpiper, 1965. In the mid-1960s, few celebrity couples attracted more public fascination than Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. Their romance had already scandalized headlines around the world. When the two actors appeared together on screen, audiences expected passion, glamour, and explosive chemistry. That expectation created enormous pressure for The Sandpiper. The film tells the story of a free-spirited artist living along the rugged California coastline. Taylor plays Laura Reynolds, a woman raising her son alone while living far from traditional society. Her quiet life changes when a married clergyman, played by Burton, enters her world. What follows is a forbidden relationship filled with emotional conflict and moral tension. The film attempts to explore themes of freedom, guilt, and the boundaries between love and responsibility. Visually, the coastal setting is breathtaking. Dramatic cliffs and crashing ocean waves provide a romantic backdrop for the story. But critics quickly attacked the screenplay. Many reviewers argued that the dialogue felt overly sentimental and unrealistic. Instead of feeling natural, the romance often appeared staged and artificial. Audiences expecting the raw intensity of Taylor and Burton's real-life relationship instead encountered a slow and heavily melodramatic drama. The result was disappointing box office performance for a project that seemed destined to dominate theaters. Star power alone couldn't rescue the film. Even Hollywood's most famous couple couldn't guarantee success. The Agony and The Ecstasy, 1965. Creating great art often requires suffering. That idea forms the heart of the Agony and the Ecstasy, a historical drama about the legendary Renaissance artist Michelangelo. The film stars Charlton Heston as the stubborn sculptor and painter struggling to complete the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Opposing him is Rex Harrison as Pope Julius II, a powerful and impatient leader demanding results. Their relationship becomes a battle of wills. The Pope wants the project finished quickly to display the Church's power and glory. Michelangelo wants time to perfect every detail of his masterpiece. The film recreates Renaissance Italy with enormous attention to historical detail. Massive sets, elaborate costumes, and grand cathedral interiors give the production an impressive visual scale. Yet audiences in 1965 were divided. While critics appreciated the performances and historical ambition, many viewers found the pacing unusually slow for such an expensive production. Instead of action or spectacle, much of the story focuses on artistic frustration, philosophical arguments, and the exhausting labor behind Michelangelo's work. The film ultimately became respected as a thoughtful historical drama. But the large production budget meant it needed massive ticket sales to succeed. Those crowds never fully arrived. What remained was an ambitious film about artistic genius that struggled to achieve commercial glory itself. The Hallelujah Trail, 1965. Western comedies were extremely popular in the early 1960s. Studios believed audiences would happily watch almost any large-scale frontier adventure filled with humor and action. The Hallelujah Trail was designed to be exactly that kind of crowd-pleasing spectacle. The film starred Burt Lancaster, Lee Remick, and Jim Hutton in a sprawling comedy about a wagon train carrying 40 wagons filled with whiskey across the American West. When news spreads that the shipment is heading toward a remote frontier town, chaos begins to build from every direction. Temperance activists want the alcohol destroyed. Native American warriors want the cargo seized. The U.S. cavalry wants to keep the peace, and the desperate townspeople simply want their whiskey to arrive. The premise promised endless comic possibilities. Director John Sturges staged massive scenes involving cavalry units, large wagon caravans, and sweeping desert landscapes. But the production's enormous scale created a serious financial problem. The budget grew far beyond what a comedy could realistically earn back. While audiences enjoyed parts of the film, ticket sales failed to justify the extravagant cost. Instead of becoming a light-hearted Western hit, The Hallelujah Trail became a cautionary example of what happens when a comedy grows too big for its own financial expectations. Sometimes the biggest wagon train on the frontier carries a very expensive risk. Those magnificent men in their flying machines. 1965. Few films of the 1960s attempted something as unusual as those magnificent men in their flying machines. The movie recreated the fragile early years of aviation, and when daring pilots competed in dangerous air races using experimental flying machines that looked barely capable of leaving the ground. To bring this world to life, filmmakers built fully functioning replicas of early aircraft. These delicate planes were flown for real during filming, creating spectacular aerial sequences rarely attempted in cinema. The story follows an international race across Europe, where eccentric inventors and fearless pilots compete for a large prize and global fame. The tone is playful and adventurous, mixing comedy with large-scale spectacle. But the production required enormous logistical effort. Building the aircraft, staging airfields, coordinating aerial filming, and transporting crews across multiple locations pushed the budget extremely high. Even though the film attracted attention for its ambitious visuals, its earnings struggled to match the massive cost of production and promotion. For audiences, the movie delivered charming entertainment. For the investors behind it, however, the numbers told a different story. In aviation terms, the film successfully took off. But financially, it never quite reached the altitude its producers had hoped for. In Harm's Way, 1965. War epics often rely on spectacle. Massive battles, explosions, and heroic speeches that celebrate courage in the face of danger. In Harm's Way chose a different approach. Directed by Otto Preminger and starring John Wayne, the film explores the chaotic early days of the United States Navy following the attack on Pearl Harbor. Rather than focusing on a single battle, the story examines the personal and professional struggles of naval officers attempting to rebuild their shattered command structure. Wayne plays Captain Rockwell Torrey, an experienced officer navigating both military responsibility and complicated personal relationships. The film assembled an impressive cast that included Kirk Douglas, Patricia Neal, and several rising young actors. Visually, it recreated naval warfare with impressive scale, including aircraft carrier operations and large naval engagements. But the film's tone was unusually serious and reflective. Instead of constant action, much of the narrative focuses on strategy, emotional conflict, and the psychological toll of war. For some viewers, this depth made the film compelling. For others expecting a fast-paced war adventure, the pacing felt slow and heavy. The movie also ran nearly 3 hours long, limiting the number of daily theater showings and reducing potential box office revenue. While In Harm's Way earned respect for its ambition and performances, its financial results fell short of expectations for such a large-scale production. The film demonstrated an uncomfortable reality of Hollywood economics. Even respected war dramas can struggle commercially when audiences expect excitement, but receive something more contemplative instead. The Great Race, 1965. At first glance, The Great Race looked like a guaranteed blockbuster. The film starred Tony Curtis, Jack Lemmon, Natalie Wood, and Peter Falk. It was directed by Blake Edwards, who had recently found success with stylish comedies like The Pink Panther. Everything about the project suggested large-scale entertainment. The premise was simple and wildly ambitious. Two rival adventurers compete in an enormous international automobile race from New York to Paris. Their journey takes them across deserts, mountains, frozen oceans, and several continents. To capture the absurd scale of the race, the production staged enormous action sequences involving vintage cars, elaborate sets, and thousands of extras. One scene alone, a massive pie fight, became one of the most expensive comedic sequences ever filmed at the time. Audiences who saw the movie often enjoyed its playful energy and slapstick humor. The film had colorful costumes, cartoonish villains, and an adventurous tone that felt like a tribute to silent-era comedy. But the financial reality was brutal. The production budget reportedly climbed close to $12 million, an enormous amount for a comedy in the mid-1960s. For the film to become profitable, it needed truly massive ticket sales. Instead, the box office response was respectable, but not spectacular. The film didn't collapse completely, but the enormous budget meant that even decent attendance couldn't recover the investment quickly enough. Over time, The Great Race developed a loyal fan base and became appreciated as a charming adventure comedy. But in its original release, the film's extravagant cost turned what might have been a success into one of the most financially risky productions of its year. In Hollywood, sometimes winning the race isn't enough. You also have to outrun the budget. The Cincinnati Kid, 1965. On the surface, The Cincinnati Kid had everything a successful Hollywood drama needed. The film starred Steve McQueen, one of the fastest-rising actors of the decade. His cool screen presence and growing popularity made him a reliable draw for audiences looking for tense, character-driven stories. The premise was simple but powerful. McQueen plays Eric the Kid Stoner, a talented young poker player determined to prove he is the best gambler in New Orleans. To do that, he must defeat the reigning master of the game, an experienced professional known as the Man, played by Edward G. Robinson. Most of the film takes place around card tables, smoky rooms, and tense gambling halls where every glance and gesture carries meaning. Director Norman Jewison builds the story slowly, focusing on psychological pressure rather than physical action. Each poker hand becomes a battle of nerves, pride, and reputation. Critics praised the performances, especially the quiet intensity between McQueen and Robinson during the climactic card game. But commercially, the film faced a difficult challenge. Audiences in 1965 often expected large-scale spectacle or dramatic action from major studio releases. A quiet drama about professional gamblers sitting around poker tables did not immediately feel like a must-see theatrical event. Marketing also struggled to communicate the film's subtle tension and character-driven storytelling. While the movie eventually gained respect over time and is now considered a classic gambling drama, its original theatrical performance failed to match the financial expectations attached to McQueen's rising star power. The film demonstrated a common Hollywood miscalculation. A strong cast and intelligent storytelling can create a memorable movie. But at the box office, audiences sometimes demand something louder, faster, and far more explosive. The greatest story ever told. 1965. Few films in Hollywood history began with expectations as enormous as the greatest story ever told. The project aimed to deliver the ultimate cinematic retelling of the life of Jesus Christ. Studios believed audiences around the world would flock to theaters for a grand religious epic. Director George Stevens approached the production with extraordinary ambition. Massive desert sets were constructed across the American Southwest. Thousands of extras were hired to recreate biblical crowds. The cast included an astonishing lineup of famous faces, from Max von Sydow as Jesus to brief appearances by major Hollywood stars. At the time, the production budget climbed to roughly $20 million, an extraordinary amount in the mid-1960s. It became one of the most expensive films ever made. But the problems began long before the movie reached theaters. Filming ran far over schedule. Scenes were repeatedly reshot as Stevens attempted to perfect every visual detail. The running time also grew longer and longer, eventually stretching to more than 4 hours in some early versions. When the film finally premiered, audiences admired the scale but struggled with the pacing. The story unfolded slowly and solemnly, focusing heavily on visual grandeur rather than dramatic momentum. Instead of emotional engagement, many viewers felt overwhelmed by the film's length and seriousness. Another problem quietly damaged the illusion of the story. Because the film included numerous celebrity cameos, some appearing only briefly, many viewers found themselves distracted by recognizing famous actors instead of focusing on the narrative. Despite enormous promotion and worldwide attention, the box office results were disappointing compared to the staggering production cost. The film eventually earned some revenue through later re-releases and television broadcasts, but during its original run, the financial damage was already done. Instead of becoming the greatest religious epic ever made, the greatest story ever told became one of the most infamous financial disappointments of the decade. It was a reminder of something every studio executive eventually learns. So even the most ambitious story ever filmed can still become one of Hollywood's most expensive mistakes. Hollywood in 1965 proved something surprising. Big stars, massive budgets, and ambitious ideas didn't guarantee success. Some of these films were visually spectacular. Others had legendary actors and directors behind them. Yet they still collapsed at the box office. And the truth is, Hollywood kept making the same risky mistakes. Because some of the biggest disasters in film history were still ahead.